Meeting of Education Skills and Wellbeing Scrutiny Committee on the 8th of January 2023. I am Councillor Rebecca Phillips and I will be chairing this meeting. Just to make everyone aware, this meeting will be recorded. Please can you ensure that your phones are switched to silent for the duration of the meeting and that your microphones are muted when not speaking. If members wish to speak or ask a question, please could you raise your electronic hands or physical hand in the council chamber. Also, for those in the chamber, please use your microphone when speaking. It's great to see you all here this afternoon, and I'd also welcome other members and cabinet members from the council for joining us. Welcome, croeso. Today we will be discussing the report contained within our scrutiny agenda, which is the consultation on the 2024-25 budget proposals. In relation to item 3, officers have advised that ENV 20, ENV 21, ENV 22 and ENV 23 should be listed under Education Skills and Wellbeing and not under Environment. In relation to ENV 20, can I confirm that only the pest control part of the proposal relates to this committee? Agenda item 2, declarations of interests. Are there any declarations of interest from members today based on the items that we chose to scrutinise?
There's no declarations in the chamber, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Diolch. So moving on to the consultation on the budget proposals. The report is included on our scrutiny agenda. We will today be looking at the elements that fall under the Education Committee remit. Your comments from this meeting will form part of the formal consultation response to the budget. Members are reminded of your obligation as part of the budget consultation process to put forward any other proposals for budget savings which are not included within the attached report so that officers can give them consideration as soon as possible. I'd like to bring Hugh Jones in at this point. Thank you very much. I know some members have raised concerns regarding the timeline of the consultation, which is something that we actually discuss every year, but is something that's totally out of our hands. So Hugh, if I could bring you in just to discuss that element of the process, please. Diolch.
Okay, diolch, Chair. Thank you very much. Yes, so as you mentioned, Chair, obviously it's a very short and condensed period for consultation of a budget, which launched on the 20th of December and closes next week. We thought that that would be sufficient time for members to consider the proposals, given there's nothing particularly contentious included within, and it'll also give officers the time then to take on board any feedback that members may have, so that we can then discuss and consider final proposals for the Cabinet in beginning of March. Thank you, Chair.
Diolch yn fawr, Hugh. As discussed in our pre-briefing, we will be taking each line of the proposal one by one. So Andrew Thomas, Director of Education, if you'd now take us through the proposals, and there'll be a chance for members to ask questions on the proposals. Thank you. Diolch.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we'll do. I've got my heads of service with me today, and they're ready to sort of describe each one of the lines within. Well, in terms of my directorate, I know this committee has a broader remit than that. My directorate on page 26 in my report. Just before they do that, I'd just sort of like to tell the committee that what they got before them in terms of my directorate and others is the sort of culmination of work which has probably been going on since last May. We've always known we we're going to have a budget problem going forward. We've been working hard to try and, first of all, identify the scale of the gap, the funding gap going forward, and then once that's been established, obviously then try to resolve those issues and the saving strategies, as I say, for my director on page 26. The focus for all of us as officers has been to secure services going forward and protect jobs. And I think as far as absolutely is possible, given the financial situation we find ourselves in, I think what these proposals do represents that. It's the best that we can do, given the conditions we're under, to secure services and protect jobs, because that is really, really important. I'm sure we'd all agree that it's people that make a difference and it's people who deliver services. So that's what our focus has been all around. So everything you see in front of you has the underpinning principle of doing those two fundamental things. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Chris Saunders. I don't think Hayley Lurvey is here today, so she's got one proposal which I will talk to.
I am here, Andrew. Sorry,
Whoop.
I've jumped on. I've come back from leave.
There we are. Hayley Lurvey is with us, and therefore I don't need to talk about that particular proposal. So I'll hand over to Chris Saunders now. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Chair. Would you like to take these in order? Is that how you want to do them? Okay.
Yes,
great.
please. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Yes, yes, please, Chris, and then stop after each one. Is that what you want to do to see if there's any questions, Chair? Is that right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that would be perfect. Thank you. Thank you, officers. Diolch.
Okay. Oh, I shall work in that way. I think, as Andrew just said, it's been a process to get to where we are. I think for my services, as you all know, there was within the existing MTFP, last year's MTFP, there was a sort of a general notion to try and get them down to as close to break even as possible, and that was in the was in that in the midterm financial plan, and that's really where we sort of come in and started to look at how we might do that. So the figures have slightly changed since last year's MTFP as we've sort of started to break that down a bit more, but it would be fair to say that, you know, for 24-25 we're well advanced in some of those proposals. From then on, you know, we're still looking 2 or 3 years ahead and slightly less advanced. I think it's also worth just saying that some of my services, the majority of my services, have got the ability to trade as well. So, you know, whilst that's a blessing, it can also be a curse. But in this terms, it's, you know, the ability to sort of generate income is something that we've got that a number of other services haven't got. So we're very much looking at it in that sort of growth and looking to sort of generate that growth rather than just sort of cutting and taking services back. As I say, that's the ability that we've got. I would also just add, before I go on to those lines there, that there's also a proposal for, I think it's about a 7.5% price increase across the board on everything, and that will be really quite difficult to do on top of some of these savings. I just wanted to sort of put that out there. These are difficult savings to achieve, but you know, that at least that just makes it slightly more difficult. In terms of Markham Country Park, which is the first one on there, so there's a £456,000 saving over the 3 years of the MTFP going forward. That brings it about close to break even, or bring it to break even. So currently it subsidises by about that amount. In the first year, we've sort of done a bit more work around that than actually some of the others because of the numbers involved, and we're looking at some staff efficiencies. We've already made some headway on that, with a particular member of staff looking to flexibly retire, which allows us to sort of be a bit more creative perhaps in how we're going to sort of manage the site. We've got some trading improvements around catering in particularly, and looking at things like using ice cream and a bit more effectively around Charlotte's Pantry site and around the shop there. Looking at some trading improvements within the orangery, and we've just appointed one of the members of staff there as the orangery manager to try and get that up. Well, not to try and get out. Orangery is a fantastic service, but to try and push it on again in terms of that. So with the orangery, it's worth noting that it's sort of maxed out in terms of bookings. Really, it's very difficult to get too many more bookings. It's about trying to sort of upsell and make sure that we're using some of the daytime space in a slightly more creatively way and upselling to the bookings that we've got. We're also looking at car park management as well. I mean, there's a big opportunity there. So at the moment, we know that a certain number of people will walk away and won't pay, and we're looking at how we might manage that in a tighter way, should we say, so that as people are coming in, we're not given that opportunity to not do that. And there's a number of different routes, and ANPR, automatic number plate recognition, is one way that we're having a look at that at the moment. And then, so for future years, we're into sort of things like looking at a sort of motorhome site, caravan site down on the bottom end of Margam, looking at how we might work better with the visitor centre or that car park element. Again, pushing that on in terms of catering sales, major events, and we've got a number of things around sponsorship and things like that as well that we would look in terms of that plan. So there's a plan forming with the team. We're a bit further on for next year, as you'd expect them perhaps in the future years.
Okay, thank you very much, Chris. So just for members, I'm sure you are following, but that was ELL1 on Margam Park. Do we have any questions on that, please?
Chair, Councillor Reynolds has a hand up in the chamber.
Great. Councillor Reynolds, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick query. You talked about at least one staff loss. It can be very difficult from experience improving services and increasing take and increasing activities whilst losing staff. What are the implications of the loss of staff that you're referring to there? I mean, I don't want to go into details of names, obviously, but it's, what are the implications of that loss of staff? What do we lose?
Well, yeah, it's not a loss of member of staff. It's somebody flexibly retiring and has taken the opportunity. And actually, I think they probably would have. I think they probably would have retired in permanently retired. Actually, had we not been quite flexible about it. So we've actually managed to keep them. We've actually turned us into a slightly more positive story. So they will work on a very senior member of staff, and they'll work around the sort of the future of the castle and the heritage lottery strategy for that, and actually working with staff across the whole country parks estate as well, with the Knoll and Craig Gladys and Avon Forest Park around that sort of future strategic functions for some of those areas. So operationally, actually, it doesn't lose an awful lot. It's more about keeping hold of that member of staff and their skills to enable that lottery bid, as more than anything else, to come forward.
Thank you. Diolch, Chris. Councillor Peter Rees, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask what's happened to the proposals for the zip wire and that at the other end of the park? What's happened to that proposal? Because you didn't mention anything about that, Chris.
No,
I'll respond to that if I may, Councillor Rees. I think we owe this committee report in the very near future to pick up on what you've just asked about, Councillor Rees, because there's sort of further developments now around the castle and the development of the castle and a successful HLF bid, and probably we'll talk about the future strategic direction of Margam Park. So that the answer to what has happened to that proposal will be wrapped up in that report, and we can bring that forward to this committee certainly before the end of the financial year, Councillor Rees.
I asked that question simply because when I was the cabinet member, those proposals were being advanced, and we had people on board to actually implement the proposals. So I just wondered what's happened to them. That's all, Andrew. But what you're saying, they put on ice again, are they?
No, they're not put on ice, and it's a fair enough question. But as I say, we'll need to bring a full report around those proposals and future proposals around the HLF bid for the castle. So that you are right, that members are owed that report, and this committee will have that report before the end of this financial year, because there's a lot of detail in there, Councillor Rees.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We don't see any other questions on Margam Park. So, Chris, if you wouldn't mind moving on to Pontardawe Arts Centre, ELL2, please. Diolch.
Thank you. So Pontardawe Arts Centre, you will note there was the report that came forward just before Christmas for the cinema project there. So how that has achieved everything it needs to achieve through financing and everything else, that will form the majority of the savings proposals for that site. That 120,000 over the period of time isn't the total subsidy there. it's closer to about 175,000, and we don't think we can ever knock that out completely for that site. But we plan to take about 120,000 over the 3 years. So we've smoothed that out over the time, based on some price rises this year, and then when the cinema's opened, then it will be the cinema that funds it from there. And when I talk about price rises, I've asked the team to look really carefully at ticketing. And then things like catering and bar prices in particular at that site, which I think are slightly undercooked, and there's some opportunities there to try and raise a bit of extra revenue through that.
Diolch, thank you, Chris. Do we have any questions on that line of the budget, please?
Nothing from the chamber, Chair.
No, I can't see any. Okay, so if we move on to ELL3 Princess Royal, please, Chris.
Thanks. So that's fairly similar to Pontardawe Arts Centre, although you will note from the recent Levelling Up Fund announcement that as we're sort of starting to work out how that might impact things, that means that Princess Royal will probably actually have to close at some point in about a year's time, for a period of time, to allow the work to take place. So the figures on here are going to need a review in light of that. They're slightly out of date, given that we've had that change, and we're still trying to understand what that looks like in terms of the programming. So effectively, that would be that's able to be met by driving some extra income again through secondary spend in the majority of areas, additional bookings, and being quite shrewd about when and how we put those bookings in to try and minimise our costs. And actually, Princess Royal has done well this year. Actually, the forecasts are good for this year as well. So we will already have met some of that through the extra trading that the team have managed to do this financial year.
Thank you for mentioning the Levelling Up Fund as well, because obviously that changes things, and I know it's difficult for anyone to kind of predict things at the moment, but do you have any idea when we'll have a kind of clearer picture of things at that end, or are we still up in the air?
Still a bit up in the air. We've got there's some planning meetings coming forward over the next few weeks, but I think we're looking at a sort of development phase of about a year. So we're not planning to sort of close it in the next 12 months or so, but it's going to be some time in 12 months on, and then it will be closed for a considerable period of time while that work takes place as well.
Okay, diolch, Chris. Do we have any other questions on that line, please?
No further questions from the chamber, Chair.
No, okay, great. So moving on to indoor leisure then, please, Chris.
Thanks. So well, in terms of the saving, there's two parts to indoor leisure actually. There's a line in the pressures, which I'm sure Hugh will give you more detail on, which is around putting in an amount of money into the budget for Celtic Leisure, which I understand is sort of regularising the situation and making sure that as part of the core budget and not part of the reserves, as it has been for this year. And then there's a £460,000 saving there for next year proposed, which is a sort of mixture of sort of trading improvements and sort of energy efficiency measures. We recently received a grant from Sport Wales for some energy efficiency measures, and that'll help us reduce some of the operating costs, or help Celtic reduce some of the operating costs. Membership has bounced back, and we're almost sort of pre-COVID levels, and we've seen some real growth at Neath Leisure Centre in particular, where there's now a core membership of 2,550, which compared to 1,200 at the old site. So if you do the maths with that works out, actually that membership works out at about £400,000, something along those lines. Now I'd expect a levelling off of that, new centre bounce, and then you'd expect it to sort of drop off a little bit, but that gives us some comfort that £460,000 is doable, and we've been quite prudent about that because of the sort of volatility of the market. Celtic have also been really proactive in terms of their pricing, and memberships have gone up quite a lot in recent years, and proposals are to freeze them for next year. so they can remain competitive in that market. And there's some local competition actually now with the new Pure Gym come in, which we really want to be very careful about, making sure that we're not overpricing ourselves. So Celtic aren't overpricing themselves. However, we are going to have another look at the casual user prices. So things like casual classes, casual swimming, because some of those are relatively low, I think, and obviously can be used to help drive those memberships in that slightly more commercial way. So that piece of work is being done now. And then catering through Celtic's has had a full review, and they've instigated a number of efficiencies and improvements in the area, again, including some price changes. And there's a new soft play area, a new soft play site, which is either going into or just gone into. I haven't been on site. I think it's due in now, in the lobby of the Neath leisure centre there, which, whilst it'll be free to use because it's a fairly sort of small unit, it will hopefully encourage people to stay, and that secondary spend element within that lobby area as well. And then just finally on Celtic, we've also taken the opportunity to bring the pass and the nurse service, so the physical activity side of things and the exercise referral side of things, much closer to the centres, so they're a bit more core to what the centre's trying to achieve. So the health of the community and the benefit of the community, and so they're now using our own leisure sites much more than they're using third-party leisure sites. So that's keeping some of that money in-house, but also some of that creating footfall in where there currently wasn't any is really important. And I'd just say, Celtic are doing they've got a business plan. They're doing sort of a bit of a review and picking up some objectives for each site. I think as they start to come forward, we will inevitably need some investment funding, sort of investor save type things in terms of some of the ideas that are likely to come forward over the next the next 36 months, looking at the saving sheet there.
Okay, diolch. Thank you very much, Chris. I know Councillor Wood would like to ask a question, so if you'd like to come in, Councillor Wood.
Thanks, Chair. Chris, I've seen obviously the figures here, £460,000 saving. I mean, that's a net profit that you sort of add into the balance sheet. In order to get that net, you need sort of turnover increase about 4.5 million. You're talking huge figures here. You could almost do, I think, a committee meeting on all the different things that would have to go in to make this huge saving. And I mean, it does also pose the question as to what happened last year, and things like that. If we can go from, generate a £460,000 in 1 year net profit from a few alterations to the budget of Celtic, I mean, I find that quite staggering, that we'd, within 4 or 5 years, we get it to 660,000 when, we've been looking at a business that has historically struggled. And I'm not saying, I haven't got the minutiae figures, but that being the largest saving on the budgets list that we've got here, I would have expected it to possibly been broken down a bit more and, be a bit more decisive in those numbers, because, I'm looking at this now, I'm seeing a saving of £500,000 from nothing to £500,000 net profit is huge. I mean, there are a lot of private companies out there that would love to go from a standing start to a £500,000 profit by just a few increased memberships and looking at trading arrangements. I just think that on this one, it would have to be very, very carefully monitored, because if it goes off slightly, you could be looking at a huge shortfall if this doesn't come in for the business. Thanks, Chair.
Would you like to come back on that?
Yes, please.
So thanks, Councillor Wood. You're absolutely right. It needs to be needs to be carefully monitored. And we've been, as I say, we've been quite prudent about it to try and I don't want to put things in there that are going to causes a problem later, albeit we've got to stretch ourselves as well. If you, in terms of the 10% you were talking about in terms of trading improvements, you would be right if we were talking about things like catering. Absolutely right. You've got to generate a greater return to get your bottom line surplus. Absolutely. In terms of memberships, where the majority of this would come from, and energy, we're dealing generally with sort of fixed costs. So to run a leisure centre, you've got to staff it, you've got to put the equipment in there, you've got to heat the pool, all those sorts of things. And most of the time, those costs are fixed. So every additional membership you can get is straight onto the bottom line. And that's really the majority of where this would come from. There would be additional membership straight onto the bottom line, and obviously reductions in energy costs, which are just straight off the bottom line as well. So that's why in terms of that trading, we can be a bit more have a bit more comfort that that's achievable.
Thank you, Chris. Could I bring Andrew Thomas in at this point, please? Diolch.
Could I just come back a second, Chair? Possibly.
Yeah, Councillor Wood. Yeah, and then Andrew, please.
Just quickly on that point. I mean, yes, the increased memberships are a higher percentage of net profit, but are you also including then the cost of depreciation of equipment? If you get increased membership, plus with energy prices, we don't know with current economic conditions, especially what's happening currently in the Red Sea with the Suez Canal, if energy prices could rise again. I just thought I'd make those 2 points because those are the 2 points that Chris has come back with. Thanks.
Thank you. Andrew, please.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Wood. You make some very good points there, and particularly on the geopolitics, just sort of goes to understand the volatility around some of these figures. But I just wanted to explain a little bit further around what these figures represent, because you used the term profit. Profit is a it's a funny term. It can mean lots of things to different people. But just to put this profit into context, the cost to the council of running Celtic Leisure next year will be £3.6 million. So we're going to give them £3.6 million to run our leisure services, and that's after we've assumed the £460,000 efficiencies that Chris has just described to you, and the way we think we're going to deliver those £460,000 of efficiencies. There are lots of risks to it, and you quite rightly identify things like energy costs, but that's not a profit. That's a reduction in operating deficit, which is obviously significantly different to. So it's £4 million this year. We're asking them to deliver £460,000 of efficiencies on the back of all those things that Chris mentioned, which will result next year, net of all those energy increases that we've experienced over, as of today, energy costs have gone back up, haven't they? Whether they have a Celtic lot, I'm not sure, because we tend to buy energy in advance and all that sort of stuff. But next year, we anticipate the cost of Celtic being £3.6 million to the council. So it's not a profit, it's a reduction in deficit. So I just wanted to make that point. Thanks, Councillor Wood.
Chair, Councillor Reynolds has a hand up in the chamber.
Thank you. Councillor Reynolds, please.
Thank you. Slightly different point, but on page 21, there are mentions of the further delays in taking Celtic in, and lower down there's costings related to that. I know that the unions have been notified, and it states in the report, of a year's delay. Have they been advised on possible further delays? They're citing staff insecurity and ongoing impact on morale that can impact their achieving further efficiencies. That's the worry. So these efficiencies could be impacted by concerns over their jobs. They've called for a working party to develop a workable business plan in the next few months. How are you going to respond?
Sorry, how am I going to respond to whom?
To the unions who've called for a working party to look at the business plan over the next few months, because business plan's been mentioned, but the committee has never seen a business plan despite asking for it.
The business plan is for when the decision to bring Celtic, or rather when Celtic are coming back into the local authority. So we will need a business plan to see what that looks like across the whole directorate. In terms of the unions asking for the business plan, it isn't for us to answer that. Celtic are an arm's length company, and if they want to sit down with the trade unions, then I'm sure they will. But Celtic will have to have a business plan, and do have a business plan to deliver these efficiencies that are detailed within this report. But it's a matter for Celtic board as to whether they create a working party with the trade unions, not the council.
Thank you, Andrew. I understand that it is a case of, though, a business plan to look at achieving the results, which, even though we've been indicated, it may well be delayed indefinitely. The unions, as I understand it, haven't been told that. They've been told there's a year's delay. So they're looking at the business plan to take Celtic back in. And so are we, to be quite honest. So, so am I. And wondered, that's what the working party they were asking for. Now that's, as you say, it's across the whole directorate. It's not just a Celtic issue. So that's the query.
My response to that was, if it's decided that Celtic come back in on April the 1st, 2025, in advance of that happening, the business plan for the Leisure Services Directorate will be presented to this committee in good time, probably around the autumn, October, November time, I would imagine, as it was planned for last year. But of course, those discussions took place then.
Sorry, Chair, if I may. Is the staffing in place within this budget to enable that to happen?
What to happen? The business plan? Yeah, well, Chris will lead it. Yeah, Chris's responsibility to put that business plan together as part of an overall Leisure Services Directorate within Neath Talbot Council, within my directorate. So yeah, certainly.
Thank you, Andrew.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. So moving on to ELL5, which is Aberafon. Chris, if you wouldn't mind. Diolch, thank you.
Thanks. So this is just looking at the seafront in a slightly more commercial way than perhaps we've done now. We have a kiosk by the splash pool there that is currently sort of let out and is being expanded and extended actually as we speak, and there are a few opportunities around there to drive a bit of further income. Quite how we do that at this stage, I couldn't, I can't go through that detail because I haven't quite got it, whether that's running in-house or tender it out or work with another third party to run that. But we are sort of in the throes of just trying to work that one through, and clearly, that's a seasonal thing. We've got a little bit of time before we have to make sure that's in place. And I think then there's another 25,000 actually in for the following year for the seafront, which really is taking the seafront strategy work that we're about to start and sort of saying, right, well, what are some of the opportunities that will come out of that, and what are some of the early things that we can do, which obviously I clearly don't know what they are yet, but that will come out and we'll identify them fairly early. That seafront strategy is due to come forward to, I think it's this committee, I think it's in April or May. So it's will give us plenty of time to run that for the following year.
Thank you, Chris. This is a really interesting piece of work, actually. Such a valuable facility for us. I know people come from all over to come to Aberafon, and I think we are missing an opportunity over there. So I'd be really interested in that plan going forward. So diolch. Do you have any other questions on this, please?
No indications in the chamber, Chair.
Okay. You'll be glad to know, Chris, it's your last one. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon. So ELL6 Library Services, please.
Thanks. So this is looking at the library service in just around some efficiency. So it's not making, as we really clear, it's not making compulsory redundancies or any redundancies. It's literally just taking some vacant posts, particularly around the library HQ side, the sort of back of house function, and just being a bit more efficient about how we team some of them up and appoint them. So we've put 20,000 in for next year, then given it a break and put 20,000 in for 26, 27, just to sort of spread that out a little bit over that period of time. I at the moment holding some vacancies within there anyway, so I'm not anticipating a problem to achieve that.
Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you. Any questions, members, please?
There's no questions in the chamber, Chair.
No. Okay. Thank you very much, Chris. And if you could thank your team as well, we really appreciate the work that goes into all these budget lines. Diolch yn fawr. So moving on, ELL7, home to school. I think, is Rhiannon on the call, please?
Yes, here I am.
Thank you, diolch.
Okay, home to school transport. This is the externally led review by the Consultants Edge that we'll be looking at to bring in some cost efficiencies and savings in the home to school transport assistant budget. It's no more than that. It's quite straightforward, and members will have had this report or reports around this through the last year. So I don't think there should be any surprises for anyone, but more than happy to take any questions.
Thank you, diolch. Any questions, members, please?
No questions from the chamber, Chair.
No, lovely. Okay, so if we move on to 8 school meals, Rhiannon, please.
Yeah, certainly. As members will know, Welsh Government have brought in free school meals for all primary aged pupils over the last year, 18 months or so. We are now feeding all primary aged, or making the opportunities available for all primary aged pupils to have a meal from reception to year 6. As part of that project, Welsh Government fund so many admin posts. They fund they fund the meals, all this type of funding that goes on. So what we're proposing to do is to use the grant funding to pay for core posts. Basically, it's not as risky as it sounds, because we have had some core posts that have finished anyway. So we backfill in with the grant rather than appointing in new. So that's the savings that we're identifying there.
Thank you. Any questions, members, please?
No questions in the chamber.
No. Okay, thank you. Moving on to ELL9, primary school cleaning costs, please, Rhiannon.
Okay, well, we've subsidised cleaning of the schools for ever since I've been in Neath Talbot. This saving proposal is to charge schools the full amount rather than subsidise it at the moment. You can see the sums are included in the document. There's nothing more I can say about it really, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Rhiannon. I know Councillor Wood would like to come in, please. Councillor Wood?
Chair, sorry, Chair. Can Andrew Thomas come in first, please?
Yes, of course, Andrew.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I certainly won't keep you long, Councillor Wood. It's just by way of a little bit of background. As Brian has just said, we do subsidise the cleaning in the primary sector schools. We don't subsidise cleaning in the secondary sector. They fund that themselves. Is it something I would choose to do? Well, I suppose on one level I am choosing to do it, but we are where we are. But that's where we're left with. I don't think any school will leave the service. It's a highly regarded service, it's an excellent service. Yes, regrettably, it means we will have to recharge each primary school in Neath Talbot a small amount more to reclaim the £234,000 back. But I think in terms of value for money, it's a fantastic service. There is a risk that some schools may decide they think they can get their cleaning service cheaper elsewhere. But I think that's a very small risk, and I might be proven wrong, but that's what I believe at the moment.
Thank you. Councillor Wood, please.
Yeah, it's just a slight concern on this one, really. Given that we've been through a major pandemic and the cleaners were asked to go over and above, and I know this is a subsidy and I understand that savings have to be made, but obviously schools are in a predicament as well when it comes to their money, and this money in some ways is a bit circular. If it comes you know, as a saving to the council, it comes out to the schools, and the schools are struggling with their reserves at the moment. And, you know, as you just said, really, there is a risk that schools could decide to opt for private companies who perhaps will not be as diligent and don't require the amount of staff that are currently involved, that you know, do a good job in keeping our schools clean. And of course, the legacy of cleaning those schools that was taken during the COVID pandemic, that legacy of knowledge will be lost to these private companies, and I hope we never find ourselves in a similar situation to what we had with COVID. But if we do, then we're going to be dealing with individual private companies and having to deal with the situation through them, and it could end up the costs are more for schools as a result than staying with the council. I just think that perhaps, you know, as far as the subsidy goes with the council, perhaps it was a worthwhile subsidy. But they're just my thoughts. Thanks.
Rhiannon, do you have any further comments or?
Yeah, only to really echo what Andrew said. We don't think schools will. It will be extra money for them, but they're still getting an exceptionally good service for what they pay. They go over, our cleaning services go over and above and give extras, you know, rather than they would get with a private company. I'm meeting this week now, first week back, with our cleaning manager, and we're going to look at the implications for every school and do what we need to do to make sure that those schools are reassured that they'll be getting the same high quality service and things like that. So it's not really what we would want to do. Of course, it isn't. We'd like it to stay as it is, but you know, it's something we've got to look at, I think.
Thank you, Rhiannon. Do we know what the difference would be in pricing in terms of us and private companies? I suppose it would be a lot more privately.
I know many years ago when I was still in school, there was talk of looking at private companies, and at that time they just couldn't offer the safeguards that we needed for school cleaning, you know, at that time, and that was pre-COVID. So I very much doubt that they're going to be able to offer that now. I don't know the pricing, but it wasn't worth, at the time, it just wasn't worth going with them. Any savings they made would have just gone by all the other extras that we would have to put into place to look at doing it. So, you know, we don't know, but as I say, when we go through each individual school now and work out the costs for each school separately and do some work with them, I think our schools will stay with us.
Okay, thank you, Rhiannon. Councillor Reynolds, please.
Thank you. I just wondered if you know, I'm aware that one of the schools I'm aware of reduced its cleaning time last year because of, you know, the cuts that we had then. So that could happen again. Is it likely they'll stay with us, but they'll reduce the amount they pay for?
I think. Oh, sorry, Andrew. No, go on.
I think that's a possibility, because that's one way of reducing the cost, but of course then that reduces the service and, you know, the frequency of clean. There are certainly certain areas within the school, you know, the toilet areas particularly, where there's no scope for cutback. You know, they have to be cleaned, you know, every day. But of course, you know, general office areas and stuff like that. And that actually over time, that's what has been happening. Because, you know, you don't necessarily need your office hoovered every day, and I'm pretty sure they don't get hoovered every day at the moment because of the cost associated with that. So that is a possibility, and obviously we'd have to adjust the staffing hours accordingly to that. But we'll do everything we can to protect the service, but at the same time try and keep it in-house, because it is such a good service. And I know schools share that belief, particularly on the back of COVID. You know, they were the 4th, 5th, 6th emergency service for our schools. So, you know, that legacy of goodwill and sort of the relationship still exists. You know, they're invaluable to schools. So it's regrettable, but I think the only sort of justification I can make for it is, as we sit here today, this report talks, we've still got a £2.7 million funding gap. I know this report doesn't mention it, but we know from the settlement that we had just before Christmas that £2.7 million actually, I think, is closer to 3.5. So it is where we're at, regrettably.
Thank you. Councillor Peter Rees, did you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. No, but I just wanted to make the point that some of our schools, particularly our primary schools, are facing challenging financial, and perhaps this addition could tip some of them over the, over the edge. I know the cleaning service is highly regarded in the schools. It always has been. But the points that Councillor Wood made are very valid, and I think we have to be mindful of the dangers that if the service is reduced to try to mitigate these increases, that there is a danger to our children. And I just wanted to make that point.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wayne Carpenter, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, a necessary evil probably in these times of cuts. But one of my concerns, I think Rhiannon mentioned that private companies had come in but didn't meet the standards. Have we got checks and monitoring that can go on to check that our schools are maintained and cleaned at the same standard as we've been used to, should they decide to go private?
Clearly not at the moment, because there aren't any private operators within our schools. But if that were to be the case, then we would have to help schools put together we've got the specification that we use now. So, but it would be that responsibility would fall on the governing body and the schools then to make sure that we would help them prepare the specification. But that checking and monitoring would be a responsibility of the schools.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Can I just come in there as well and just say that that is a huge responsibility as well, because at the moment that is all covered by our cleaning service. They know exactly all the cost, training, all of that has been done by our staff. So to push that onto schools is not something, we really want to do, and I'm sure schools wouldn't want to do it unless it really was the last resort as well. Just to add to that.
Thank you, Rhiannon. Do you have any further questions from members?
There's no further questions from the chamber, Chair.
No, that's you done then, Rhiannon. Thank you very much. And again, please pass our thanks on to the team for their hard work. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you.
So moving on to ELL10, out of county placements. Hayley Lurvey, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Just to really say about pupils in out-of-county placements, these are our very high-level, complex needs pupils. They're very often, not always, but very often led by social services. We've worked really hard over the last few years to bring this budget down in terms of providing schools with support for pupils with complex needs, put in different packages of support in for these pupils to remain in county. We've also worked really hard with social services to try to understand need. So where we are at this point in time, with the information that we have, we are looking to deliver on this, but with the caveat that, of course, that things can change very quickly in terms of situations that can unfold with our young people. But at the moment, on the information that we have, this is what we're looking at in terms of our out-of-county budget and keeping our young people within our schools. I hope that's helpful as an overview.
Thank you, Hayley. Diolch. Any questions from members, please?
No questions from the chamber, Chair.
No, thank you, Hayley. If you could pass our thanks on to all officers. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you.
Diolch yn fawr.
Okay, moving on to Chris Millis then, please. Chris, if you could start off with the ELL11 for us, please. Diolch.
Certainly, Chair. And 11, 12 and 13 are of a similar vein. It's taken an opportunity of using the grant where you can claim against admin costs. So we're going to do that with the Period of Dignity, the RISIG and the Youth Support Grant. So it's 17,020 and 10 claiming against the grant of admin costs that would have been core. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Perfect. Thank you, Chris. Members, do we have any questions?
Councillor Reynolds has a hand up in the chamber.
Great. Councillor Reynolds, please.
Just to confirm, Chris, that doesn't imply that because the grant is finite, obviously, that means cuts. Where are those coming from? Are they frontline services we're losing in order to maintain? What's happening?
No, for example, the youth service one was uplift of £10,000, which we're claiming back against core. The period dignity one, there's a huge amount of resources that are already currently in schools, so we can afford this year to take the admin cost out of it. The rice sig of over £6 million, it's only £20,000 from it, and we would take that from an underspend in a certain area of a certain school. So there isn't any consequence to it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Diolch yn fawr. Any other questions?
No further questions in the chamber.
No, happy. So that's it from the education side, unless members have any questions. If we can move on to the environment lines, starting with ENV 20. I believe we have Kerry on the call. Yeah, we do. Kerry Morris, would you mind taking us through the your budget lines, please? Diolch.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, Chair. Very briefly from me, looking at the 4 lines that I've got, they're all relatively modest savings, albeit nevertheless they are still challenging to find, given we've had so many challenging years of cuts, as members will be aware. But ENV 20 relates specifically to pest control fees and charges, and the proposal will be to raise fees and charges over and above the general uplift of 7.5% that's been identified in the covering report. Members will be aware, of course, that the service offers a range of services and fees for both domestic and commercial premises. So what we will do is, should this particular saving line be agreed by members and council, well, we will then review the fees and charges applied to these various services, and of course monitor going forward, because as is always the case when you do increase fees and charges, it may ultimately deter the public and businesses from engaging and using the service of the council. So ultimately it could be counterproductive, but that will be monitored going forward. So happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Kerry. I'm glad that you stated the importance of monitoring then, because I totally agree with you on that point. I was just wondering, do we know, even with this increase now, how we compare to the charges of a private company?
To a degree, yes. It's not necessarily straightforward, actually, to identify how we do compare, particularly with the private sector pest control services, because what they don't tend to publicise their fees and charges. What they tend to do is provide an individual quote when there's interest expressed in using their services. But by way of an example, we are aware of one particular company that operates locally that does publicise their fees. And for example, with domestic rodent treatment, they apply a fee of £120 upfront for unlimited calls, or £40 per visit, whereas NPT charges £40 for 3 visits. So we do compare quite well in that respect. We do also have one officer who's currently in the team who has worked previously within the private sector, and from his experience, we do come in substantially cheaper than companies of his knowledge. So whilst I can't give really any definitive evidence of how we do compare, I think it is safe to say that even with these perhaps modest increases in fees, we do compare favourably to the private sector.
Thank you. Diolch, Kerry. Do you have any questions, members, please?
Sorry, there's no questions from the chamber, Chair.
Okay, great. Kerry, did you want to go through ENV 21 for us, please?
Yeah, certainly. Okay, ENV 21. This relates to specifically the Welsh Government Air Quality Grant, and again, we put bids in on an annual basis. Again, members will be no doubt aware there's very much a lot of interest in air quality related matters within the Talbot area. So officers have got a very, very good track record of drawing down and claiming grant award from Welsh Government. So what we tend to do is just apply again a modest figure to this of 5,000 that we will embed within the grant, and perhaps like Chris has already outlined, we can claim that against admin costs and staff costs. So again, given the track record that we have as a team, we have got a good track record. So we don't particularly see this as being particularly onerous to deliver, but again, there are no guarantees, and if it does transpire in the future that we're not successful claiming bids, it will create a pressure on the service.
Thank you. Diolch. Do we have any questions, members?
No questions from the chamber, Chair.
No, lovely, thank you. ENV 22, Kerry, please, briefly.
Yeah, this relates to the trading standards team specifically. What we've done in this particular case, given that there was no obvious one place to look in terms of securing some savings proposals, what we've done, we've gone through a process of analysing and reviewing the various budget lines and what spend there has been in recent previous years. So what this essentially does is capture some trimming of the budget. So we say on each a number of the budget lines across the trading standards budget sheets. Some being sort of car allowances, transport recharges, taking the bulk really of the 11k, but also sort of promotional events and that type of scenario. So again, happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, diolch. Any questions, members?
There's no questions in the chamber, Chair.
Okay, thank you. And ENV 23, please, Kerry.
Yeah, I think this is my last one. So this so this relates to again, similar to the pest control service, just a very small and modest increase of fees and charges over and above the general uplift of 7.5%. A lot of the environmental health team do get engaged in a lot of training in terms of businesses usually seeking startup advice. So we're looking to increase modestly some of the fees and charges that the service offers. Again, you know, the flip side is that this could potentially further down the lines result in businesses not necessarily engaging with the council. So again, we would need to make sure that we would monitor and how this goes forward. But again, you know, we see this as a sort of a modest increase. That's certainly deliverable, I think.
Thank you, diolch, Kerry. Do we have any questions, please?
No questions from the chamber, Chair.
No questions, thank you. Kerry, if you could pass out thanks on to yourself and the team for all your work. Diolch yn fawr, thank you.
Chair, can Andrew Thomas come in, please?
Yes, of course, Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. It isn't for this committee, but I think bearing in mind what the sort of raison d'etre for this committee actually is. If you look at Environment 14, there's a street care neighbourhood suggestion or proposal there of £50,000 in terms of full cost recovery for schools grounds maintenance. As I say, it's not for this committee to scrutinise. Apart from anything else, Mike Roberts isn't here. I think the scrutiny committee for that is on Wednesday, who tells me. So it might be something that maybe members of this committee may want to put before the Environment Committee on Wednesday morning, or speak to some of your colleagues who are on that committee. I think it's only right and proper that I raise that here because it does impact on schools. So just thought I'd say that.
Yeah, we appreciate that. Thank you. Diolch yn fawr. Thanks, Andrew. Okay, so there is an item on page 31 of the report, and that's in relation to schools, which is the SCH1. And I know Noelwyn Daniel is on the call. Noelwyn, would you like to come in regarding this item? Maybe he's not on the call. No. Okay, that's fine. No problem.
Chair,
Yeah.
Chair, I can speak to that if you want me to.
Yes, yeah, there we are. Great. Thanks, Andrew.
So this is an exercise that our procurement people, officers undertook right across the local authority, and it was a sort of a review of all the spend and identified, spend which was out of contract. So in other words, schools as well as lots of departments across the county, if they purchased exactly the same thing in a different way or with a different supplier that we've got contracts with, those items would have actually been cheaper. So that £250,000 doesn't represent a cut. It just represents a more efficient way of purchasing the same thing. So I'll be asking Noelwyn, if members approve this, I'll be asking Noelwyn to speak to our schools to tell them exactly how they can go about procuring these things, and of course, other things as well. But £250,000 actually is quite a modest sum out of the total spend in those areas, which, if exactly the same things were procured in a different way through a different supplier that we have framework agreements with, they'll actually be cheaper, putting it bluntly, and therefore, so this isn't a cut to schools, it's just a more efficient way of procuring exactly the same thing. So that's what that £250,000 is.
Great. Thank you for that explanation, Andrew. Do we have any other questions regarding this report, please?
Yes, a question from Councillor Reynolds in the chamber.
Great. Councillor
Yes.
Reynolds, please.
It's on that last point. I had marked it up and wondered if we were going back to it. It's, what I was wondering about, Andrew, was, is there any additional bureaucracy, having been engaged in this sort of thing before and procurement efficiency? There's a tendency for large amounts of bureaucracy to sneak in to make these things possible. I mean, bulk ordering, all that sort of thing. Is that going to possibly put schools off? Is there an issue around that, or is it just a swap of one supplier for another?
It's not quite as simple as one supplier to another. Well, I suppose on one level it is, because we're talking about framework, where certain companies have tendered for these works, and therefore, certain items are cheaper. What tends to happen is people order and buy things where they've always bought them from because they've got a relationship, they know exactly how to do. And so the answer to your question is possibly to purchase things through a framework, or to use whatever, credit cards, corporate credit cards, which means there's a process where you've got to monitor those credit cards and somebody's got to authorize the spend, and undoubtedly there's probably a process behind this all. But ultimately, if schools choose not to follow the advice, then it will be a £250,000 cut, because that's going to be taken from their budgets. So, but we think if they follow the advice, they'll be able to secure these products and goods and services. It isn't just goods, in a more efficient way, and it won't be hugely onerous. But I think, having been in that position myself many times over the years, you tend to take the line of least resistance, because you're so busy and you just want to purchase things from the most efficient, and somebody's going to turn up and it's going to be there Wednesday morning as agreed, and because you've got a relationship with these people. But I say, going back to what I've said earlier, we are where we are, and we've got to find efficiencies. So we spend an enormous amount of money as a council on goods and services. I think it was 100 million. More than that, 250 million. But obviously some of those large capital schemes as well. And we've got to make sure that we've got a responsibility to all the council taxpayers in Neath and Talbot that we purchase these things through the most efficient mechanism possible.
Thank you. Any further questions, members?
Nothing further from the chamber, Chair.
Thank you. So, as previously noted, comments from this meeting will form part of the formal consultation and response for the budget. The report is for consultation purposes, therefore we note the report. Thank you very much all for your time this afternoon. Thank you to officers for your ongoing work. I know you're working extremely hard to make the numbers work in this, and I know it's a lot of work, so thank you. And thank you, members, as well, for the scrutiny this afternoon. Diolch yn fawr. Diolch.
Thank you.